Lucinda Williams was born on January 26, 1953, in Lake Charles, Louisiana. She grew up in a creative but unstable environment. Her father, Miller Williams, a well-known poet and literature professor, introduced her to language, rhythm, and metaphor early on. But her childhood was marked by trauma too. Her mother, Lucille Fernday, suffered from mental illness and left the family when Lucinda was just 7. That loss shaped her, filling her early years with a sense of longing, restlessness, and emotional turbulence that would later seep into her music. After her mother left, Lucinda traveled constantly with her father through the Deep South, Mississippi, Arkansas, even parts of Mexico. Along the way, she absorbed the soundscape of the region: blues, gospel, country, folk ballads, and old church hymns. Music became her emotional outlet. By age 12, she had already picked up the guitar and was writing songs. At first, her only audience was her father, but by 17, she was performing publicly in a duo with her friend, banjo player Clark Jones. School quickly took a backseat. Lucinda was drawn entirely into the world of music. She started playing in coffee houses and bars in Austin, Houston, and New Orleans, hoping someone from a label would take notice. But nothing came easy. Her voice was raw, her image didn't fit the mold, and her songs, often brooding and poetic, were far from radio-friendly. Throughout the 1970s, she kept pushing, trying to find her place in the American folk scene. But it was always the same story. In New York, they said she was too country. In Nashville, her voice was dismissed as unfeminine. In California, rock stations didn't know what to do with her sound. She didn't fit cleanly into any genre. Her folk rock was too bluesy, her country too gritty and urban. But it was exactly that genre-defying mix, that refusal to be boxed in, that would later make her a trailblazer. In 1978, Lucinda Williams decided to settle in Jackson, Mississippi, a small but pivotal move that changed everything. There, she caught the attention of Folkways Records, a label that wasn't chasing hits, but cared about documenting American music. For an artist like Lucinda, someone who didn't fit neatly into any genre box, this was a rare opportunity. She wasn't chasing trends, she was building something real, the early sound of alternative Southern folk rock. Her debut album, Ramblin' on My Mind, came out in 1979. It wasn't a commercial project, but a heartfelt collection of blues and folk covers recorded with just her acoustic guitar and voice. No polish, no production tricks, just raw, stripped-down emotion. The album didn't make it onto the charts, but critics took notice. There was something honest in her delivery, something old and haunted, like the spirit of the Mississippi Delta itself had passed through her. That critical buzz caught the attention of Smithsonian Folkways, the non-commercial arm of the Smithsonian Institution. They offered her support for a second album, this time with all original songs. And that's when Lucinda truly came into her own. Happy Woman Blues, released in 1980, wasn't just an album. It was a manifesto. This was the sound of a young Southern woman standing her ground, not as a victim, not as an ornament, but as a storyteller, a poet, a fighter. The songs blended country, folk, blues, and rockabilly, often in the same track. It felt alive, unpredictable, and it gave us a glimpse of what would become her trademark style. One standout was I Lost It, later re-recorded in 1998. With its rough edges, bluesy groove, and urgent vocal delivery, it wasn't pretty, and that was the point. It was a song about losing your grip, on love, on pride, on yourself, but singing it anyway, loud and unashamed. The title track, Happy Woman Blues, was just as revealing. On the surface, it sounded upbeat, almost playful, but underneath, there was irony. The phrase itself is a contradiction, Happy Woman Blues. Lucinda leaned into that paradox. Her message was clear. A woman can be strong and still hurt. She can suffer without being broken. Like her first album, Happy Woman Blues didn't make waves commercially. But again, the critics praised it. Still, praise didn't pay the bills. Lucinda had built a reputation. She had a few records under her belt, and she was being taken seriously in artistic circles. But she didn't yet have a real audience. So she went back to the grind, playing clubs, coffee houses, and bars for the next 8 years, building one fan at a time. Lucinda Williams spent nearly 8 years laying the groundwork for her third album. It was a long road, full of self-doubt, rejections, and dead ends, until fate stepped in once again. This time, it was the independent British label Rough Trade Records that took a chance on her. Known as a safe haven for punk and indie misfits, rough trade was on shaky ground financially in the late 1980s and open to risky bets. Lucinda was one of them. In 1988, she released Lucinda Williams, an album that would become another critical triumph and, yet again, a commercial flop. But artistically, it was a declaration. She was no longer just a promising outsider. She was a mature, self-assured voice that refused to be shaped by industry expectations. The song Passionate Kisses emerged as the heart of the record. For the first time in country rock, a woman unapologetically demanded not just love, but comfort, attention, and desire, and insisted that this was her right. When Mary Chapin Carpenter later covered it and won a Grammy, the song reached a broader audience. But Lucinda's original had a different weight. Her delivery carried that delicate blend of vulnerability and fire, sensuality and ache. It was intimate and confrontational at the same time. The album earned glowing reviews. Spin, Rolling Stone, and The Village Voice all listed it among the year's best. But record executives still didn't know how to market Lucinda. She didn't play by the rules. She refused to compromise on her arrangements, obsessed over every lyric, and often went years between releases. Her perfectionism became legendary. Producers found her maddening. She'd rewrite entire tracks from scratch on the day of recording. But for Lucinda, releasing a half-finished truth was worse than saying nothing at all. In 1992, she followed up with Sweet Old World, an album steeped in grief and existential despair. Written in the aftermath of several personal losses, the death of a close friend, multiple suicides among her circle, and her own internal reckoning, the record played like a eulogy to everything fragile and fleeting. The title track is unforgettable, a song addressed to someone who took their own life, listing the small, beautiful things they'd never experience again. The taste of honey, the sound of laughter, the feel of a lover's touch. It was devastating and poetic, and once again, completely uncommercial. Still, within the industry, her legend grew. Artists like Emmylou Harris, Tom Petty, and Steve Earle admired her fiercely. Bob Dylan even praised her, saying she was one of the few who still knows how to write real songs. Her fan base, though small, was deeply devoted. In the tiny venues where she played stripped-down acoustic sets, people listened with eyes closed, hanging on every word. Her shows felt more like confessions than concerts. But behind the scenes, things were rough. She couldn't find a label willing to fully back her vision. Recording became a constant battle for control, emotionally draining and financially unsustainable. At one point, Lucinda nearly walked away from the studio altogether. It would take nearly a decade and a lot of stubborn faith before she'd finally create the album that would change everything. In 1998, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road finally came out, an album that had taken years of struggle, rewrites, and studio battles to complete. But the wait paid off. The record won Lucinda her first Grammy, landed in the top 10 of nearly every major critic's list that year, and became her first real commercial breakthrough. Tracks like Drunken Angel and Lake Charles showed what she did best, telling raw, autobiographical stories. Her characters weren't polished heroes. They were drifters, dreamers, people searching for redemption in dusty bars and broken-down cars across the American South. But this success wasn't some lucky accident. By that point, Lucinda had fully matured as an artist. The world had finally caught up to her. Her defiant off-kilter sound, once considered too rough, too weird, had become the very thing listeners were craving. Car Wheels was gritty, emotional, unfiltered, and every lyric felt lived in. On the heels of that triumph came Essence in 2001. It was quieter, more stripped down, almost like a whisper after a scream. Sensual and intimate, the album proved that Lucinda didn't need volume to command attention. It was clear by then, she wasn't just another singer-songwriter. She belonged in the same emotional league as Leonard Cohen or Patti Smith. Starting in 2004, Lucinda entered one of the most prolific phases of her career, releasing albums almost yearly. Two standouts from this era are World Without Tears, 2003, and West, 2007. Both continued her lifelong exploration of grief, longing, and inner wounds, but now with a deeper, more philosophical tone. With age, her music didn't mellow, it evolved. She began experimenting with sounds, folding in garage rock, blues, even spoken word poetry, always stretching, always searching. In 2014, she released Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone, a sprawling double album built around the poems of her late father, Miller Williams. It was a deeply personal tribute, full of reflection and raw beauty. Then in 2020, Good Souls Better Angels arrived, a fierce, politically charged record shaped by the chaos of the pandemic and America's social unrest. That same year, Lucinda suffered a stroke. It was a heavy blow. But in true Lucinda fashion, she didn't retreat. She recovered, got back on stage, and kept making music. Her recent albums might not top the charts, but artistically, they're some of her strongest work. She's no longer chasing hits. She's chronicling life. Lucinda Williams isn't the voice of polished America. She's the voice of back roads, cheap motels, porch swings, truck stops, and half-finished love letters. And as long as that version of America still exists, Lucinda will keep singing its song,